And welcome back. It is the 17th of May, the higher plus 5 a day, and let's just go straight to the first question. Okay, so the first question is a sketch question, and it's one of these things whereby it's one of these skills that I know most people don't like, but actually saves you a lot of time in the exam if you're very quick at it. So I know 2 to the x is an exponentially curve, and so in other words, it's going to go upwards like this, and the only thing that matters when you draw this one is you know it goes to the point 0, 1, and that is it. A couple of easy marks in an exam. Next question. How many points of intersection does the curve have? Oh, that's interesting. Okay. So y equals x minus 3 times x plus 4 is going to be a parabola. And I know already that's going to cross at minus 4 and 3. But the real question is, what does a straight line do? Does it cross like this? Does it cross by just touching, known as a tangent? Or does it cross twice? And of course, the point of the question is, which one of these is it? Now, you could actually do this in several ways. You could graph it very carefully and just see what the answer is. But I think probably the easiest way is to expand the brackets. So that's going to give you x squared plus x minus 12. And then you equal it to the line, which is x minus 8. And then you solve those two equations. So let's move x to the other side. So it's going to be x squared. We'll take away x from both sides. The x goes away. Add 8 to both sides, and you get minus 4 equals 0. Which means that x squared equals 4, which means that x equals plus minus 2. In other words, there are 2 answers to my question, which means there are, to answer the question, 2 points of intersection. Good question, actually. Very well phrased question. Next question. Looks like we've got a histogram coming up. The histogram above shows the monthly salaries of employees. There are 200. Now, notice already there's no frequency density scale here. So there are 216 people who have a monthly salary between 1,800 and 2,100. And that's annoying. Now, the reason I say it's annoying is because, hold on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah. So each one of these big squares is 200. So that's 200, 400. So that's 1,600, 2,000, 2,400. And this one here is 2,600. Which means between 1,800 is half of this one and a quarter of this one. Okay. I'm pausing because I don't think this is going to be a very nice question. I think the numbers here are going to be quite horrible. Okay, so 2 ways of doing this question. So way 1, which I'm not going to do, is you can count the little squares. And you count the little squares and you find out how much each little square is worth, because you know that the little squares must total 216 for the bits that I care about. I'm going to do it a slightly different way. I'm going to do it the way that I think is more helpful, especially if you go into A level, which is I'm going to basically guess at a frequency density. And I'm going to choose a number that makes it easy for me to do this. So in other words, I'm going to do each square is 1. So therefore the big squares, or 2 big squares, are 10, 20, 30, etc. And then I'm going to work out what the height of this one is. So that's 7. And again, I've made it easy for myself because I've picked an easy scale, 22, 28. This one's dead on 10, and this one's 3. And then I'm going to draw a little grid. And actually, I'm going to do the whole thing. I don't need all this, but it just helps me explain it better. So that's going to be my A. That's going to be my B, C, D, and E. Now, let's work out what the frequency would be if I'd done the correct frequency density. So that's going to be the class width times the frequency density. Now I'm going to fill this table in so that it's going to jump, and then I'll explain what I've done. Okay, and I've just written the total in there, and you join me back as I finish the table. So to explain quickly, hopefully you've seen histograms before, but case in point, if I look at C, I can see it goes across 200, 400, which is why my class width is 400. I can see it goes up to 28, I've marked that already. So therefore the frequency, in other words, the area of that box C, is going to be 400 times 28, which is 11,200. Now what I need to do is work out the scale factor that gets from my frequency density to the 216 people that are between 1,800 and 2,100, as in the question. So the way I'm going to do that, now let's remember that 1,800 is here, 2,000 is here, and 2,100 is here. In other words, it is half of this, and it is a quarter of this number here. So a half of 8,800 is 4,400. I want to, at this stage, pause again and say, this is a difficult question. The numbers here are quite difficult. And a quarter of 11,200 is 2,800. So in other words, using my scale, I think there are 7,200 people. but the question tells me that there's 216. So my scale factor that I'm going to use is to multiply by 216 over 7,200. Not a nice number, but I'm just going to leave that like that so it's clear what's happening. Then what do I need to do? So then, going back to the question itself, I need to work out an estimate of how many employees have a salary between 2,300 and 2,900. Again, this is not an easy question. So 2,300 is here. So I want a quarter of C again. I want all of D. What is it? 2,900. And I want 3/4 of the last one, E. So let's work it out based on my number. So remember what I just said. So I want a quarter of C, which is 11,200. I want all of D, which is 2,000. And I want 3/4 of E, which is 1,200. So based on my scale, if I get my calculator and work that out, I get 5,700. However, that's on my scale, so I need to multiply by the scale factor, which is 216 over 7,200. And that gives me, well, it's a round number for whatever that's worth, but it gives me exactly 171 people. I'm going to say again, that's not a nice question. However, it is a good example of a question. If you get that, you've understood how to scale frequency density. So definitely worth thinking through. Watch it through again. Nice question. Probably just a bit too difficult, I think. Final question. An ice cream shop has 8 different flavors of ice cream. Lara chooses a large ice cream with 2 different flavors. How many combinations? And this is actually, now if you've watched my videos all the way through, we've actually had this question several times before. It's called the handshake problem. My first choice is 8. My next choice is 7, which on the face of it is 56. But of course, if I choose, let's say, chocolate and vanilla, that's the same as choosing vanilla and chocolate. So I need to divide this by 2 to compensate for the fact that actually I'm going to double up my pairs. So 56 divided by 2 is going to give me 28, which is my final answer. And indeed, that is the final answer for today. Today wasn't too bad at all, was it? Except for that histogram question, which was difficult. As ever, let me know how it went for you. Any questions, do let me know. Like, subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow.